Uh, which one do we watch? How Palantir is changing society forever? Or the secret government experiment that fucked up 11 girls? Or the worst punishment? Or the scaphism? Or the forced to drink gold? Sorry, there's a lot of fucked up shit. Ori. We're playing with people's emotions today.
Soldier
We're playing with the true crime, traumatized, historic events of
On the eastern front of Ukraine,
real life.
A Russian soldier crouches down in his foxhole as AI-directed smart artillery pinpoints his exact location and adds him to the list of potential targets. Across the world in the US, Amazon employees are monitored and their behavior is logged. Later analysis will reveal how their managers can squeeze as much productivity out of them as possible. Meanwhile, in the UK, a local police department is using software to monitor the community they're meant to protect. They'll build a wider view.
Oh yeah, if you really think about it, what is it? It's like 85%. There's already some kind of tracking system. Or some kind of facial scan, right? Some kind of scanning system tied to it. Right?
Problem areas while also creating specific profiles on the people most likely to commit crimes. So what links all of these things together? The data analysis giants known as Palantir,
right, if you really want to go high tech, they could get satellite images on your ass
and
if
who's
they really
really
wanted
pulling
to.
the strings there? Well, it's time to
Right,
introduce
the
you to the
UAV
main
drones
characters
and
behind
shit,
this new
if they wanna
Orwellian
do some
takeover,
monitoring.
starting with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel can trace his multi-billion-dollar fortune and his immense levels of power to his founding role in PayPal. Thiel was at the heart of the so-called PayPal mafia.
The
You might know some
governments
of the
have
other
enough
members,
utilities
the creators of
to
LinkedIn,
fucking
the
do what
co-founders
they
of
want,
YouTube,
alright?
the CEO of Yelp, or even Elon
They really
Musk.
wanted
Now,
to,
lots
they
of
could
future
just fucking
technocrats
push a button
involved with
and fuck
PayPal learned
people
key
up.
lessons at the company, lessons which taught them how to make far more money from their own endeavors later on. As the one CEO of PayPal and one of its biggest shareholders, Thiel was a central figure and he was no different. Of course, Thiel has been well known as a visionary investor for quite some time, with a lot of his reputation coming down to how he was the very first person to invest in Facebook. His $500,000 angel investment was estimated to have been sold for over $1 billion when he finally left the company. However, for years, Thiel was also certain that underwater homes were gonna take off and he put millions into companies pushing these pipe dreams. So they weren't all winners, as you'd expect. But at PayPal...
Oh yeah, the, what is it? Bangs? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Wait, what was N? Fuck, I forgot what was it. Not Microsoft. Oh, Netflix. That's what it was. It was Netflix. Yeah. So Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Right. Those are the, or FAANG. Oh, they added Apple later. But yeah. These are basically the biggest companies that essentially run the world in a sense. And you could say Nvidia can fit in there too. Right, Microsoft. I mean, there's other, right, there's other acronyms. But it's basically all the big companies that are running the tech industry. That's basically kind of my job.
Thiel learned about the importance of data and data analysis. You see, it all revolved around one of the biggest problems for PayPal when they were just getting started: fraud. A former marketing director called Eric Jackson wrote that the company was losing $2,300 every single hour to fraud at one point in its rise. At first, the company used the same methods as traditional banks to try and stop it, but the international, digital, and instant nature of the service they offered made this untenable in the long run, and so they needed some Silicon Valley innovation. One new method was the early adoption of what we now know as capture technology. While offering little resistance for regular users, it was a big hurdle for malicious bots and cyber attacks the company had lost so much money to before. But the one that really caught Peter Thiel's interest was called Igor. after a scammer who had taunted the company very early on in its history. By analyzing small details and detecting almost imperceptible patterns in the data from new users, Igor could detect likely fraudsters and pass that info on to PayPal's employees. This one program laid the groundwork for a company that would change the face of the entire world, and it was all down to the way that they solved the problem. PayPal, unlike the entrenched banking world, had access to all of their data in one place. The issue was that they had far too much of it to make sense of. The digital transactions, the endless details of how much was sent and where and who by and the patterns it created. It was all far too much information for a human mind to make sense of. But with PayPal, all of this was in one place, and they had used new technology to make sense of this.
Right, when you're building out these systems, you're looking at tons and tons of codes. Right, a lot of these people have literally manually coded everything. Make sure that it's getting the information needed to pass shit through. Right, the parameters, functions, methods. Right, I mean, they could be using interfaces, right? And it's all fucking on the cloud as well. They're using cloud services, and probably like their in-house
multiple
stuff.
Databases, lots of different types of information, all separate from each other.
There's a lot of back-end and front-end stuff that they all build out.
And so it was nearly impossible for them to get real accurate information from it all and turn it into an actionable strategy. And that's where Peter Thiel would come in. His idea was relatively simple really. He would use his newfound millions to create the best and most efficient data analysis company on the planet. It wasn't a unique idea at the time of course, but the way that Peter Thiel went about creating.
Usually a lot of these data analysis people, they do fucking web scraping. Right, they scrape the web of just all of its information as much as they can. Right, and then start categorizing it by what kind of information it is.
Creating it was. While other Silicon Valley types, and even his ex-colleagues in the PayPal mafia stayed within the Silicon Valley bubble, he chose to branch out. His new company Palantir wasn't going to take the same steps that other companies would. Founded in 2003, they were going to blend two very different, almost antagonistic worlds together. The first sign of this was who Peter Thiel and his other partners chose as the new CEO for the company, a man called Alex Karp. From the outside in, Alex doesn't look anything like the standard Silicon Valley CEO template. Instead of a computer science degree from Harvard, he had a philosophy PhD from Frankfurt. He's also eccentric, or at least that's the image he likes to put forward, with his long, wiry grey hair and obsession with Tai Chi. But what's most different about him is his politics. Coming from one of the most left-leaning philosophy courses in the world, and having studied under some of the most prominent academic Marxists, you wouldn't expect him to be running a company like Palantir. It strikes a stark contrast to Peter Thiel's public politics as well, as he professes to be an ardent libertarian. And then the circumstances only get stranger when you learn where Palantir really started with their business. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for a bad habit without even thinking about it? Maybe it's out of stress, boredom, or just wanting to fit in. Well, that's where Fume comes in. It's not about quitting, it's about replacing. Fume, the Simply Breathe, is built for Beach for. You see, Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that delivers great taste without any harmful chemicals. Instead of inhaling vapor, you simply breathe in natural, non-toxic flavors that satisfy the craving without the downside.
Shove it up
Whether
your
you keep your
ass.
hands busy or curb a nudge, Fume's premium wooden design is built for both flavor and function. Magnetic fidget features add an extra layer of satisfaction, making it perfect for relieving stress or staying focused. And as it's designed with high-quality building sleek aesthetics, Fume just feels premium in your hand.
Not trying to sell me
anywhere.
shit.
Whether you're at work, traveling, or just relaxing at home, personally, my go-to flavor is crisp mint because it's super refreshing and keeps me feeling sharp throughout the day. But Fume offers tons of different flavors, there's something for everyone, which is why over 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit change journey. So if you're ready to try it for yourself, now's the time. Because for a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using my code MOON, you'll get a free Fume topper and awesome accessories to level up your experience. So click the link tryfume.com/moon or scan the QR code on screen to get yours today. In 2003, 2 years after the attacks, the atmosphere was still one of fear and aggression in America. Maybe Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and their fellow founders could take PayPal's anti-fraud framework and apply this to national security against similar threats. If they had actually done this before the attacks, they might have spotted the strange pattern of trained pilots taking flights into the US from high-risk countries, or the movements of known insurgents before the attacks themselves, Prevention beats a cure, and having the relevant information put in front of human operatives could have stopped the entire tragedy before it ever happened. And so you could see how this would be a very tantalizing opportunity for the US. But at first, nearly all of Palantir's early capital came from Thiel's own pockets, tens of millions over the first few years. Silicon Valley and private hedge funds laughed them out of their offices. While they did have the name recognition, nobody wanted to get involved with national security. In their eyes, it was an old, decrepit industry, a relic of a much more brutal, primitive world. Some of the only outside money came from what would end up being Palantir's most important investor, the CIA. Through their relatively new venture capital arm, In-Q-Tel, the CIA kicked in a few million to get the ball rolling. Really, this paled in comparison to what Peter Thiel had paid in, but it was the contacts and the place in the industry that was really important. The vote of confidence meant Palantir was integrated into the establishment from the very beginning. Meanwhile, they brought an innovative new look at security problems that stunned most of the big names in the industry. These were the companies they were competing with, old names in the military-industrial complex like Lockheed Martin and Base Systems. While they had decades of experience and trust, they lacked the new code.
Stop talking about the military-industrial complex.
Of paint that Palantir's Silicon Valley origins gave them. Alex Karp's plan for the day-to-day running of the company pushed them further forward. It was a combination of classic Silicon Valley tech bro gimmicks mixed with ruthless efficiency and a cult-like dedication. Palantir offers famously low salaries, but it's the company culture that keeps people there. They have the same offerings of beanbags and video game consoles that other Silicon Valley companies do, but they also encourage incredibly long hours. And interestingly, Alex Karp put no focus whatsoever on sales, sending out the same people who made the software to pitch it to clients. With all of this talk of company culture though, it's really easy to underestimate the power they could theoretically wield. If a company or a government agency hired them, they were giving them access to all of the data they had.
Correct.
Palantir would feed it into their software and give them solutions they asked.
You know where this is going? You give these companies so much access to that data. How much of that data is going to be used against their own citizenry, right? Who's gonna fucking start stealing that data? Like employees. Some of them might have been trying to do.
But did they store?
I mean, you already have some.
What did they learn from it, even if they didn't store it? Each client made Palantir's software smarter and made it see clearer. Knowledge is power, and Palantir turned data
people
into
come
knowledge.
out saying that
for the first few years, the company was
shit.
almost entirely integrated with the CIA. They were both one of its biggest investors and its only client, drip feeding it contracts as it slowly grew over time. Lots of this early work was based around in-house data management. The CIA already had plenty of information, they just needed someone to link together and consolidate their separate databases. Then the project expanded to their government organizations and Palantir integrated their information as well. All of this was then put into a unified platform, which government employees could easily access with the right clearance. Though the first real test came with the War on Terror, there's no other arena where data and knowledge is more important than military intelligence. It was especially true in the kinds of—
So basically, they're saying that the government has a, they use a system like Palantir to house all of their government information, right? And it's a database where they can just pull up the information they need.
Wars America was fighting where they lost far more men and vehicles to roadside IEDs than to enemy soldiers. Knowing who the insurgents were, the location of booby traps and where they were hiding was absolutely key. Palantir offered a solution. Using the data management technology they'd been developing, they could put together all the different sorts of information that the US was gathering. Drone footage, satellite imagery, reports from soldiers on the ground. It was all fed into their algorithms to figure out who was an innocent farmer and who was an enemy combatant. Palantir called it their God Eye View, an account from Annie Jacobson's book First Platoon.
God Eye View? You know who first did that? Batman. Right?
Describes how this worked during the war in Afghanistan. Palantir had flagged what looked like an Afghan farmer because of one strange detail about him, unlike most other Afghan farmers.
Yeah, these systems were already in place.
Over a period of weeks, an intelligence operative watched his daily movements, learning his patterns. At first, it did just seem too strange to be true.
I mean, why do you think they use satellite imagery and fucking UAVs sometimes?
It became clear he was working as an insurgent and a strike was scheduled. But when the day and opportunity came, something seemed off.
There's eyes in the sky.
man they were
guy,
tracking looked and
right?
seemed the same, but he was acting very slightly differently. If it
Oh,
was
the
up to the
fucking
software, he
opium
would have
field,
been
yo.
blown sky high. But the operative knew something was off. Even though he was still wearing the purple hat, he just wasn't acting like he usually did. Just minutes before the final call had to be made, the real target emerged from his home and confirmed the operative's suspicions. The person they'd been tracking the entire day was someone completely different, someone completely innocent. With just moments to spare, the operative called off the strike. And it's these kinds of mistakes that were dangerously common at first. When they rolled back the tape, it turned out that a glitch in the camera system they had used made a different man's hat look purple, and that had caused the confusion. But over time, Palantir's systems got much more sophisticated. Soon, they began being able to accurately predict people's future movements. We know of all of this because someone in the loop talked about it after the fact, but we don't know how many mistakes they usually make or think they made. The data is just obviously not publicly available to us, but it hasn't stopped this technology developing incredibly quickly, and the effects are harder to see. Palantir may have well prevented lots of bad things from happening, but it might have also caused lots of them as well. All the mistakes they made and the patterns they saw led to real-world actions. Soldiers almost certainly interrogated innocent civilians because the system flagged them as untrustworthy. Harsh measures and military force will have made regular people more bitter and angry, pushing them towards insurgency. There's nothing to gain in making something more efficient if the war itself is useless and endless anyway, only creating more conflict later on. An endless series of wars is perfect for Palantir though, as it lets them test out their gadgets in various war zones across the world, optimizing their system to be as deadly and accurate as possible. And today, we can commonly find it in use in Ukraine and Gaza. And now, most of the job is just done by AI, with very little human intervention or decision required. A kind of chatbot-style program provided by Palantir offers up suggestions to commanders like a waiter making recommendations off a wine list. But they're also now getting into hardware, building AI-powered tanks and other weapon systems. And with the world going in the direction it currently is, it's absolutely no wonder why everyone's now talking about them and their stock has shot up dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, look, why do you think a lot of people started investing in AI as soon as shit hit the fan, right? Why do you think some of these people have been lifting restrictions off the AI? Why do you think? Why was Putin and Xi already lifted restrictions on AI, huh? Why did they get subsonic missiles? Oh man, you people are so fucking cooked. You guys have no fucking.
As this technology and integration with the US deep state would,
you know that these people are running R&D, right? On a lot of this stuff behind closed doors. Oh no, it's not true. They're not making weapons.
be enough by itself to make Palantir incredibly powerful.
Everybody's making
but it definitely
robots,
isn't
right?
enough for Alex Carb, Teal, or Palantir. Instead, they decided
Everyone's
to turn their
trying
gaze
to make
inwards
a
to use the
big
same surveillance
humanoid
technology on the
robot for
home
some
front.
reason,
Using
eh?
these same systems,
you already
Palantir
have
has
dog
been
robots
an
with
essential partner
guns.
of police forces across the West for years now. They've been most famous for their software that lets police departments
Only a
engage
matter
in
of
something
time.
known as predictive policing. In the same way that Palantir predicted which Afghan farmers were insurgents, they can also predict
do you think
which regular
robotics is
people
so
are
fucking
involved with
strong?
crime. Based on all the data that police forces have about people, they can draw up district or city-wide maps of where crime is likely to occur. They can then suggest patrol routes, where to station officers, and even which people to arrest. These systems often do nothing to actually counteract the inherent bias in the data they're given. When police patrol more often a given area, they find more crime and make more reports. That then gets fed into the system, which tells the police to invest more resources into that specific high crime area. But this is definitely not the worst part of the system though. You see, Vice obtained documents given by Palantir to a California police force they had a contract with in 2016, and the details were shocking. With their easy-to-use system, a police officer could simply type someone's name in and learn a staggering amount of information about them. Palantir would tell them what their email address was, their phone number, their date of birth,
I don't
and their
know
address.
if it's a dude or
With
a
just
chick,
a
I have
license
no
plate
idea.
number, it could look at footage from public CCTV and figure out specific locations you'd been over a period of years, building up a complete pattern of movement. It could even link you to other people you spend time with and find out info on them as well. This is an invaluable tool in the hands of someone looking to control people. Both Orwell and 1,000 historical dictators couldn't have dreamed of a more effective tool for keeping track of their people's movements, patterns, and inner private lives. So aren't we lucky that our leaders are so much more responsible and trustworthy? Unfortunately, it isn't just policing either. Palantir has gotten its claws into every level of government.
Oh yeah.
In the UK, the National Health Service recently signed a deal to hand over the entirety of their data, a treasure trove of medical records and patient info, to Palantir. And the laughable thing is that they don't get paid for this. In fact, it's the UK taxpayers that are paying Palantir $500 million to manage and analyze this for the government. This data, which should have remained private anyway, is invaluable for fighting future pandemics and assessing how effective different treatments are. Experts have described this as being one of the most valuable resources the UK
or at least
had.
some people.
The US had nothing to compare.
You gotta
because
pay
of
a
its
lot of money to
separated
try and
private
fucking
healthcare system. It's
crack
like
down
Saudi
on all the
Arabia paying a
information
private
being
company to
fucking
take their oil off their
spilled.
hands. And now it's in Palantir's hands, along with all the confidential patient data that came along with it. The irony of all of this is that Palantir's biggest investor, founder, and shareholder, Peter Thiel, is keen on advertising how libertarian he really is. He pays lip service to the talking points on podcasts, makes a splash in political circles by donating to Republicans, and he was the first big name from Silicon Valley to jump on the Trump train.
We're voting for Trump because we judge
the
leadership of our country to have failed. Now that someone different is in the running, someone who rejects the false, reassuring stories that tell us everything is fine.
But the fact is, though, that this all runs completely counter to what he does and who he really is. He literally owns the company that's pioneering the new deep state, an unholy union between Silicon Valley privacy invasion and deep state power. It isn't just taking over the...
Basically, they're becoming a monopoly where they house all the information. That's kind of bad. What if they get attacked?
World it already has, and now Palantir's coming out of the shadows with the IPO and their public contracts with big banks and corporations. All of Carpenter's political theatrics are a smokescreen for their true place in the power structure. The maintenance and extension of the surveillance state is a bipartisan issue for them, one of the only things they agree on. Those in power, be they Democrats or Republicans, Labour or Conservatives, are always pushing it a little bit further. This is why Palantir has grown so quickly and will grow even larger over time. They fit right into the same moldy old power structure, increasing its reach into people's lives. Meanwhile, they profit from conflict, chaos, and fear. Even their name makes reference to this, Palantir. In The Lord of the Rings, the Palantir were magical orbs which could be used to see things across great distances, like an all-seeing eye. Alex Karp insists that the company's role is to protect the Shire.
The way you dominate the future is you dominate the present. I want America to be American in 1,000 years.
And they often boast about all the tragedies they prevented.
I mean, the Batman is the most recent one
never
with actual validity to AI technology, right, and being tracked and scanned and shit.
Protection. We don't even know the extent of how much freedom we've lost because.
And then you have right, and then when Batman stopped being Batman, he destroyed the whole system because he knew it was way too good. It was way too powerful, way too fucking dangerous.
Of all of this. Meanwhile, both Karp and Thiel have enriched themselves to the tune
and now
of
they're
billions
creating
of dollars,
it
and the
in
stock
real
market
life
is
for
going
some reason.
absolutely crazy for Palantir. And thank you,
I can
for
already
sponsoring
see this going south. All it takes is one fucking big ass terrorist organization to fucking come in and try to fucking take that shit.
Remember to check them out with the link in the description below.
All it takes. All it takes is one crazy fucking group to go balls to the walls and just fuck you up, right? You're housing it all in one area. Yeah, that sounds like fucking suicide. Alright. Here's another fucked up one. Oh yeah, there was a Twitch one that I wanted. There was the Twitch streamer one. That's a good one for all the fucking dumbass influencers around the world. Or the influencers who like to stay hidden or doing some shady shit. Oh, I know about you motherfuckers. Oh, I know about the human psyche. Oh, I know humans very well. Education's a bitch, ain't it?
July 16th, 1945, 5 girls were captured happily swimming in a river. But look closely at the image. This was no average hot summer day. It was snowing. Or at least, that's what they thought. The truth was much darker, because none of these girls would live past the age of 30. Except for Barbara Kent, the girl kneeling in the middle. She had to watch as all of her friends slowly died, one by one, until she was the only one left. So when she started to develop similar symptoms as her friends, Barbara feared she might be next. Her thoughts went back to the
there's
day
a lot of
this photo
psyops
was
going
taken,
on in
and she
mainstream
wished they
media
had
and
never
shit.
danced
Influencer
in the warm
sphere.
desert snow. It was the summer of 1945, and Barbara Kent was attending a small dance camp located in the desert near Ruidoso, New Mexico. Karma Dean's dance camp was, for many young girls, the perfect place to unwind and enjoy their love of dance. The owner and facilitator of the camp, Karma Dean, was a tough but motivating instructor who always had a smile on her face. The camp offered training in many dance styles, including ballet, tap, and modern dance. The campers, girls aged 10 to 16, twirled, swayed, stepped, and shuffled as they practiced dance routines. And when they wanted to rest, they would swim in the cold river beside the camp. With enthusiasm, Barbara and the other girls often practiced and performed their dances late into the night under the beautiful star-filled night sky.
Star-filled night sky?
Spies and shit?
That sounds nice. Why don't we ever do anything like that? Go camping, be one with nature. I'm sure Bean'll love it.
Power outlets are critical for my operational existence.
The outdoors isn't really my thing.
Oh, right. Silly me. I forgot that you just ruined the whole trip with your fear of literally everything. Look at these girls, though. Having the time of their life. What bad stuff could possibly happen to them? Nothing bad will happen to them, right, bro?
For Martha Jenkins, one of Barbara's fellow campers, she was having the time of her life. We were so engrossed in our routines, she recalled. The desert seemed like another planet, and we felt like we were dancing on the moon. Karma Dean made us believe in our dreams.
Karma Dean.
Another camper, Susan Abernathy, added, "We didn't have a care in the world. Our days were filled with dance and laughter. We were far removed from the reality of the war." And indeed they were. After all, World War II, which was still raging all over the Pacific Ocean and Europe, was far from mainland USA. Pearl Harbor in Hawaii was the furthest an enemy had been able to penetrate into American territory.
Correct.
And that was more than 3,000 miles away. Sadly, Barbara and her fellow campers had no way of knowing that they were about to be caught in the middle of a dark, horrific part of world history.
Oh, God damn it.
On July 16th, the girls were all sleeping peacefully in their beds when a deafening sound jolted them out of their bunks. Many thought it was thunder. Others believed it was part of some military exercise, while the dance instructor assumed that one of the camp heaters might have burst. The truth, however, was something much more horrific. An extremely bright white light accompanied the sound. Julia Carter, a senior dancer, recalled that it was the brightest light she had ever seen. As they watched, they were filled with fear and fascination. Barbara and her fellow campers jostled out of their cabins. It was supposed to be dark as it was still nighttime, but as Barbara recalled, there was this big cloud overhead and lights in the sky. It even hurt our eyes when we looked up. The whole sky turned strange. It was as if the...
Was this the Pearl Harbor bomb? When they fucked up Pearl Harbor?
sun came out tremendous. A few hours later, the sun came up, the camp opened, and the girls prepared for their daily morning routine as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, until the snow fell.
The snow fell? In New Mexico? In the middle of July?
Very unusual, isn't it? Barbara and the others described it as dainty snowflakes falling from the sky. They thought it must be some rare desert weather anomaly. So, the girls excitedly changed into their bathing suits and jumped into the river. They laughed gleefully and rubbed the white powder on their faces. Barbara joined in on the fun, but the snow felt off.
Maybe it had something to do with the acid rain stuff.
Instead of being cold like snow, it was hot. And we all thought, well, the reason it's hot is because it's summer. We were just 13 years old. The dancers were having the time of their lives dancing under the hot snowfall. The flakes continued to descend and settle over the surrounding.
Mexico.
Surrounding area for a few days. And a few weeks later, summer camp was over, and it was time to go back to school.
That's it? So nothing bad happened to them. Good.
Not exactly.
The
residents in the surrounding area saw the strange event too, not just the girls in the dance camp. And some likened it to witnessing, quote, the end of the world. In fact, the flash of light shone over 3 states. Can you imagine just how bright that light must be that it can be seen that far away?
Aliens! Calling it right now. It was aliens!
And now, hold on. Just because this was the first time that humans had ever witnessed a cataclysmic burst of energy of this caliber does not mean its source was extraterrestrial. Remember the snow that fell on the camp? Well, it fell in other places too. Gardens, orchards, farms. It even fell into ponds and rivers, which were the main sources of drinking water. And some of this snow turned into white mist that settled in ravines.
Uh-oh. This isn't gonna be good, is it? Sounds like the start of a horror movie.
In Oscuro, New Mexico, about 45 miles away, a family covered their windows with wet bed sheets to prevent the snow from getting into their house. They knew that it was not normal snow, as their chickens and beloved dog died soon after they were first exposed to the substance. At a ranch 30 miles away, the snow fell on cattle and burns appeared on their hides. Eventually, their skin healed, but the fur in the burned patches was dull gray and white.
Is there even still a question about this stuff actually being snow?
No, they did not have the naivety of childhood. They knew it was not snow, but they had no way of knowing what it was. With the fiery blast that engulfed the skies, the thunderous explosion, and the mysterious white substance that caused livestock and pets to get sick and die, residents rightly became concerned. What really happened the morning of July 16th? What was that blast? And if their animals were getting sick and dying, would they be next? The public demanded clear answers. Under pressure, government officials held a town meeting and a press conference in the mountain resort village of Ruidoso, New Mexico. Barbara, her family, and everyone in the dance camp joined the rest of the community to hear this important announcement. She remembered the huge size of the crowd. Everyone was standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear what officials had to say. U.S. Army General Leslie Groves ordered the commanding officer of Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which was around 60 miles from the explosion, to issue a statement to the Associated Press. The commanding officer walked up to the potent announcement. She remembered the huge size of the crowd. Everyone was standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear what officials had to say.
Was this when the U.S.
General
fucking
Leslie Groves ordered the
nuked?
commanding officer of Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which was around 60 miles from the explosion, to issue a statement to the Associated Press. The commanding officer walked up to the podium and cleared his throat. He looked at the crowd of concerned citizens and read from his carefully prepared script. A remotely located ammunition magazine containing a considerable amount of high explosives and pyrotechnics exploded. He also explained that while the event seemed startling, there was no loss of life or injury. Basically, government officials were saying that while alarming, it was nothing to worry about and everything was fine.
I think they accidentally
but people were
unleashed
still
a fucking
confused.
nuke.
Some people
Or at least a
believed it and
small
let
one.
the issue rest. Others remained skeptical.
Well, no one had been hurt at least, right?
No, not right away. The worst part of it was what happened after that, and not just hours or days, but years later. You see, Barbara's fellow campers started getting sick. Linda Foster, who was 12 when she had attended the dance camp, suffered from thyroid cancer as she got older. Like Barbara, she was puzzled. What could have caused her cancer? Her lifestyle? Genetics? Linda wasn't the only one. As years passed, Barbara grew increasingly concerned about the news of her co-campers getting sick and dying, and began to worry that she would share the same fate as her friends. By the time Barbara was 30 years old, just 17 years after that day at camp, she had tragically become the sole survivor of the 12 girls who had danced in the falling summer snow.
No, July
And
19th,
now,
New Mexico.
she too began suffering from
Past
several
30.
cancers,
Varying
including
onset of
endometrial
symptoms.
cancer, which affected the lining of her uterus. It wasn't just the girls from the dance camp who were getting sick either.
All I can say is
Take, for
probably a
example,
nuke.
Tina Cordova, who grew
Right.
up in the small town of Tularosa, New
Uranium,
Mexico, 40 miles from where the
radiation.
explosion took
They
place.
got radiation poisoning
Although
from
she wasn't
something.
even born yet when the event took
Right,
place,
whatever that
her
flash
family who lived in
was
and around Tularosa, New
whatever
Mexico,
that
suffered a
snowfall
myriad
was.
of cancers after the incident, like stomach, breast, and even brain cancer. At least 10 members of her family were diagnosed with the illness, and, unfortunately, some didn't survive their fight. Like Tina's father, who developed prostate and tongue cancer. The tumors spread to his neck and became inoperable.
Yeah, this
He
is
sadly died
radiation.
in 2013
This is
at the
radiation
age of
poisoning,
71.
literally.
Tina was not spared from the epidemic of cancers that afflicted her family and the citizens after the blast.
This is what happens
In
when you get
1997,
radiation
when she was
poisoning.
39 years old, she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer.
Jeez,
Right,
how many
because
people's
radiation
lives have been
kills your
destroyed
fucking
by
cells.
whatever this was?
The mysterious effects
mutates
on
your
people's
DNA
health were
too,
felt
a little
hundreds
bit.
of miles away from the site of the incident. Possibly most heartbreaking was its effects on infants. Robert Alvarez, senior police advisor to the
Essentially,
Energy Department secretary, found that while infant
cells
death
are
rates in New
dying
Mexico
from the
had been
inside
decreasing
out.
since 1940, they increased
a
in
fucking terrible way
1945
to go.
by 56% within the 3 months following the event. This finding was mirrored by a healthcare provider earlier in 1945, who pointed out that 35 infants in New Mexico died in August 1945 alone. The government downplayed concerns, telling concerned citizens there was no pertinent data. Officials stated that public health and safety were not compromised.
And the dang government has the nerve to just deny that anything was happening? I bet you they're 100% responsible for all of this. They should have reached out to Morgan & Morgan and sued the government for everything they've got.
What are you talking about?
You know,
What are
America's
you
largest
talking about?
personal injury law
God damn
firm.
it.
These guys
Bastard.
went big. If you're ever seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions.
you shut up
A
with
Morgan
your
& Morgan
ass.
case in Florida ended in a settlement of $12 million, which is 34 times the highest insurance offer. And in Philadelphia, another case went home with 40 times the highest insurance offer at $26 million. And that was only within the last couple
Our
of months.
results do not
Because of all the
guarantee a
contracts.
similar result.
Right? And they don't settle for lowball offers. Instead, if you become their client, they will fight to get you what you deserve. And you don't even have to pay these guys unless you win. If God forbid you ever seriously get injured, your case could be worth millions. And you're only a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. It's so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/brew. Found in the description below, or by scanning the QR code on screen from your phone's camera. Thank you, Morgan & Morgan, for sponsoring today's video.
Sorry, Grill, but Morgan & Morgan wasn't founded until a few decades later. But in terms of the government being liable, you might be right. A connection can be tracked back to 3 years before the blast. In 1942, the government acquired an area of land in Socorro County, New Mexico, condemning it and suspending grazing rights. Only a couple of abandoned buildings in the project's reinforced base camp were in the immediate vicinity. The government scientists wanted to test a futuristic top-secret weapon that they had been developing in a remote, isolated, and unpopulated area with flat terrain and little to no wind. After surveying multiple candidate sites, they decided that the area in Socorro County was suitable. But here's the thing. Even though the site was deemed isolated, there were nearly 500,000 people residing within 150 miles of the test site. Karma Dean's dance camp was even nearer, 50 miles from the site.
Well, clearly that wasn't far enough.
And that's not all. Some surprising things were uncovered later. Let's see. The governor of New Mexico in 1945 was not even informed of the nature of the test. In fact, he only found out about it after the war was over. Also, a day after the blast, FBI agents went to major newspapers to repress potential stories that might raise questions or issues about the test. In fact, the Defense Department fabricated 3 different stories with 6 different explanations for the public, including the story about the ammunition dump explosion. And finally, the White House had ordered and pressured General Groves, the director of the top-secret project, to develop a new war-ending weapon quickly. And as with any war tactic, the enemy should never...
When did they say this happened? The most significant secret weapon test that caused a notable flash was the Trinity nuclear test, conducted on July 16, 1945. This was the first detonation of a nuclear weapon, which resulted in a massive explosion and a bright flash visible from a great distance from 3 states, right?
know what you are doing. General Groves even had one of his physicists, Klaus Fuchs, arrested for allegedly sharing classified information with the Russians.
Man, it's a lot of preparation to make the test secret. Wait a minute. Is this what I think it is?
And when some of the project doctors and physicists tried to warn Groves of the potential health risks, they were met with indifference or
Manhattan
even anger.
Project.
The worry was that an order of evacuation would cause suspicion and panic among civilians.
Yeah.
Simply
well,
put,
I mean, it's before
the most
the
important
Manhattan
priority
Project,
for General Groves was to get the weapon ready for wartime use.
This
and to keep it a secret.
was before they
All
made,
other considerations,
I guess, the Manhattan
including public
Project
safety,
official.
were secondary.
Oh no.
And on July 16th, 1945, a test version of the weapon, nicknamed Gadget, developed as part of the Manhattan Project, was detonated at the Trinity Test 60 miles north of the White Sands National Park.
It's the fucking
and the world
Trinity
shook
bomb.
with the first ever atomic blast. Gadget released a massive explosive energy of 25 kilotons of TNT, sending out a shockwave so powerful it could be felt 100 miles away and forming a mushroom cloud that reached 7.5 miles in height.
And you know what
For a
that
second
does?
or two,
That
the
fucks up
blast
the environment.
10,000 times hotter than the surface of the sun.
Yeah, whenever you shoot a nuke, you're gonna cause some problems. You're gonna get fucking toxic rain, radiated clouds, and all that shit. And then where were those women? Yeah.
Illuminated the night sky. When Gadget detonated, only 3 out of the 13 pounds of
As you
plutonium
can see,
that was
humans
in the
do some
bomb was
fucking dumb
actually
things.
used up. When an atomic bomb explodes, it releases enormous amounts of energy, creating a fireball that vaporizes everything in its vicinity.
Around it, yes.
The intense heat and pressure
If
from
you
the
were to get
explosion
directly
heats the
hit
air,
by that,
which
you're
rises
fucked.
and causes a vacuum
you're
in its
instantly
wake.
disintegrated.
This lifts soil, water,
That's how much
and other
energy
debris
that comes
into the
out of that thing.
atmosphere, which forms the characteristic mushroom cloud. The vaporized materials mix with radioactive isotopes created by the nuclear explosion and the leftover plutonium. These fission products are made of highly unstable atoms that emit harmful radiation, which now linger in the mushroom cloud.
Yes,
Then, as the
it's
cloud
meant to
cools,
explode and kill
the
people.
contaminated
It's basic.
debris.
If you really think about it, the nuclear weapon, right, is a fucking bioweapon. That's why nobody wants to shoot nukes. It's literally a fucking bioweapon.
falls back to Earth as radioactive
fucking
fallout,
radiation?
which
Yeah,
looks
that's not
similar
fun
to
to do.
ash. As the ash fell,
Yeah,
it
have you
danced
seen
in the wind
the
and met
stories
up with a
about
group of
people who
girls
have
were dancing
radiation
as well.
sickness?
They giggled
Yeah, they go
and
through
played
some
with the
terrible
highly
fucking
radioactive
shit.
ash, even pressing it against their faces. They didn't know
Yeah,
any better,
they had no
because
idea.
this ash
They were just
was white
fucking-
and fluffy. It didn't look dangerous
They
at
were
all.
swimming in
Are you
it.
freaking kidding me? So that snow was actually radioactive fallout
you
stuff?
swim. No,
Indeed,
yeah.
it was.
If you don't
After the bomb detonated,
as soon as
a part of the
that
mushroom
shit
cloud
happens, you're
drifted
fucked.
east, another part to the west and northwest.
It literally
and a
kills
third
your
to the
cells
northeast.
instantly. You're fucking
In
dead.
all, the radioactive
There's
cloud
no
spread
saving
across
you.
a region 100 miles long and 30 miles wide. And as it spread, it rained radioactive particles along the way. In time, the fallout even reached New York, which was thousands of miles away.
Correct.
Thousands of miles?
Yep.
Well, the wind.
Remember, the dance camp was just 50 miles from
50
the testing
yeah.
site. So they were
Air. Hello? The wind can blow shit real far away. Why do you think it's really bad for fires during windy seasons? Yeah, because it picks that shit up and just moves all that shit all around.
definitely
Yeah.
in the path of that cloud.
Like I said,
19
scientists
counties,
are fucking
78 towns
dangerous
and
people.
cities, and a large number of ranches and farms were downwind from the cloud. Some of the hot spots reached almost 10,000 times
said,
the radioactivity
Scientists
levels
are
allowed
probably
in
one of the
public
worst
spaces.
people on the fucking planet.
2,000 miles away in Rochester, New York,
Alongside with
Kodak
lawyers,
X-ray films were even affected.
politicians.
The radiation caused black exposed spots, called frogging, to appear on the
kill
films,
people.
rendering them unusable. 5 days after the detonation, the Trinity Test's chief medical officer, Stafford Warren, wrote to General Groves that there was a large quantity of radioactive dust in the air. He even added there's a very serious radiation hazard within a 2,700 square mile area downwind of the test. And radiation contamination is a serious thing.
Yep.
Tiny particles of plutonium can go deep into the lungs and lymph nodes. They can be carried to vital organs such as the liver, stomach, pancreas, or bones through the bloodstream, and just small amounts can lead to cancer.
Radioactive fallout produces dangerous ionizing radiation. which has enough energy
That's why you don't want
to
to fucking
DNA
shoot nukes
and
anymore.
can lead to mutations in
That's
genes.
exactly why.
These mutations can cause cells to grow uncontrollably,
I mean,
which
just look
leads
at what
to
happened
various
to
cancers,
Hiroshima
including
and all those
leukemia,
people.
thyroid cancer, and bone cancer.
Right,
It
some of those
wasn't
guys got
immediately
radiation
evident,
sickness.
but over the next few decades, people who lived through the blast began to develop health problems, most notably cancer. And it didn't stop at that. In 1984, a study about exposures in southwestern Utah to radioactive fallout from atmospheric nuclear detonations at the Nevada test site was conducted. There was a noted increase in leukemia, thyroid, gastrointestinal, melanoma, bone, and breast
even
cancers.
just shooting
In
a
another
small
study
nuke
conducted by the
is
National
super
Cancer
fucking
Institute and the
dangerous.
Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it is estimated
You're
that
literally
80,000
allowing
people
the
who lived or who
plutonium
were
and all
born
that
in the
fucking
U.S. in the past 50
radiated
years
dust to fucking
may have
move
contracted
around.
or will contract cancer as a result of all the nuclear tests done.
The guys doing the bombs knew that could happen, right?
Well, here's the thing. They knew there would be fallout, but
Yeah,
they knew very
well,
little
they didn't
about
care.
it. And the instruments in those times used to track it were primitive.
Yeah.
They bought cattle that were burned by radiation to study them. But
Yeah,
they
if you
didn't
really
collect
did,
data
yeah,
about
they didn't really have like the meters until later.
civilian exposure in an attempt to avoid mass panic.
Right, they didn't make
Louis
the
Hempelman, the director of the team tasked with
the
managing
radiation
the radiation
meters
from
till
the
way
Manhattan
later.
Project, said in a 1986 interview that the Manhattan Project's leaders
was the
were
radiation
aware
meter?
that civilians may have been exposed, but they couldn't prove it, and we couldn't prove it, so we just assumed that we got away with it.
This is downright evil. Criminal at the very least. Someone has to answer for this. Bro, please tell me that the people responsible for all of this needless suffering have been brought to justice.
Well, Grill, that's the mission of the Downwinders, to hold the government accountable for what happened that day.
The what?
The Downwinders, that's what they call themselves. The people and communities who were exposed to radioactive contamination from nuclear weapons testing. They lived downwind from the testing site, hence the name. These residents
The
from New
Geiger
Mexico,
counter,
Arizona, Nevada,
1937.
Colorado, Idaho, and Montana believe that
Oh, wait,
since
no, that's,
1945, they have been exposed to the dangers of radioactivity and that America
it was
has poisoned its citizens.
Yeah,
Tina Cordova,
the
who survived
instruments they
cancer
had
but lost many
weren't
family
that
members to it,
strong.
is a downwinder. She later founded the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium in 2005. Their complaints and demands for accountability were finally heard in 1990 when Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA, due to pressure from sympathetic politicians, the downwinders, and the public. With this act, the government provided $50,000 as a one-time compensation to claimants who passed eligibility. Initially, the compensation was limited to former uranium miners who fell ill. Uranium mining used to be a big industry in New Mexico, and the biggest risk for the workers was breathing in radioactive radon gas and other decay products of uranium. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer, next to smoking. But the mines were unsafe for nearby residents also, like in Homestake, New Mexico, when a mine was leaking uranium into the nearby groundwater. Even after it closed, it continued to contaminate the groundwater and released radon gas. Radon can even be in your basement right now, even if there's no uranium mine nearby, so be sure to get it checked. The communities around uranium mines were never compensated, which added to the struggle downwinders were facing. The strict limiting qualifications to be eligible for coverage were the subject of complaints that later forced Congress to amend the RECA. Amendments were eventually approved in 2000, and compensation was given to people who may have been exposed in specific areas around the Nevada test site. Eligibility eventually increased to those affected by over 1,000 nuclear test sites all around the country and in the Marshall Islands. To date, $2.5 billion has been distributed to 39,000 claimants, while military and government workers at the Trinity test site became eligible for the RECA
They had the counters, but they didn't
many
have
civilian downwinders
the
remain
suits and
ineligible
everything.
or struggle to prove their eligibility due to strict criteria. They need to show links between their disease, their exposure to nuclear radiation, and prove that they
basically back
resided
in the days
area
they
during the
exposed
tests.
themselves to
Proving
so
these things
much
is not a
fucking
walk in
bull.
the park for these citizens. This is what these downwinders are fighting for: financial restitution and a formal apology from the US government.
Well, they deserve it.
But it's an uphill battle, Grill. There's debate on whether or not the fallout from nuclear testing actually caused a spike in cancer. A popular belief is that legendary actor John Wayne died from cancer because he and 220 cast and crew were filming The Conqueror in 1954, 100 miles downwind from the Trinity test site. Of the cast, 91 members contracted cancer over their lifetime, and John Wayne died of it.
That would be a cancer rate of 41.36%.
Jeez, that's a lot.
But is it? Men and women have about 40% chance of getting cancer in their lifetimes in the United States,
right.
A rate that's remained similar throughout the years. Not to mention that The Conqueror had a cast of heavy smokers, including John Wayne, who smoked 5 packs a day. He got lung cancer, which he survived, but then died of stomach cancer in 1979.
Given all the shit we
One of the
put
big
into
causes
our
of stomach
bodies
cancer
and
is also smoking.
Right.
Okay, but what about the people who live there with the fallout?
Well, radiation can cause several types of cancers, but general full-body exposure can cause leukemia. And a 1991 study found there wasn't a significant link between the fallout of all nuclear tests during the 1950s and leukemia cases in Utah. They determined how much radiation was in the bone marrow of those who had died of leukemia, and found only a weak association between the two variables. It's also important to note that fallout effects don't last a very long time. The most dangerous of the radioactive isotopes have a fast rate of decay, or half-life, which is why when a nuclear bomb goes off, it's only recommended to stay inside for around 2 or 3 days. But of course, longer half-life isotopes, which aren't as strong, will linger in the environment for a much longer time. If you go to the Trinity test site now and stay there for an hour, you'll receive a dose of at most 1 millirems. You receive far more than that from the surrounding environment within the span of a year, like from the sun and the food you eat. But to put that in more perspective, getting an X-ray taken can be anywhere between 20 and 900 millirems.
So yes,
in fact, another study that
basically
looked at
every
cesium-130
time you do X-rays, you get a little radiation. It's not a lot, but it is a little bit, right? Every time you get sunlight, you're getting radiation. Very minuscule, but you are getting radiation. Every time you eat food, very minuscule radiation. Right? Water, everything. You're getting fucking radiation from everything.
37 and plutonium in soil around Utah found that population doses from external exposure throughout Utah were far too low to result in any statistically observable health effects. With studies that contradict each other, lack of proper recording equipment, and the government's desire for secrecy hindering immediate studies, it's difficult to establish what amount of health issues were actually caused by fallout from all the weapon testing during the 50s. Downwinders are a debate to this day, and Utah currently has some of the lowest cancer rates in the United States. When you or someone you know is diagnosed with cancer, it's a frightening thing. Having a place to direct your anger is easier than accepting it as pure chance. But as the saying goes,
I mean, I hate to say it,
correlation
but
does not imply
a lot of it
causation,
is just chance.
Meaning just because you know of atomic testing in the area and someone gets cancer, it's not necessarily connected, especially if that person is a heavy smoker or the family is genetically inclined to get the disease. But were the girls from the dance camp just statistically unlucky?
Your genetics
or were they
has
victims
you
of
getting,
government negligence during nuclear testing? We do know they danced in the
family
fallout, pressing what they thought was snow to their faces
runs in the family,
at the moment where it was the most dangerous.
Whether
we
it's
also
heart
know that
issues,
they all got cancer,
right.
most of them dying before they turned 30. We can never know with 100% certainty, but the correlation here is a strong and tragic one. One thing is for sure, nuclear weapons are
actually
devastating
lactose intolerant.
Their devastating effects are long-lasting and far-reaching.
Generation.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more videos, like this one about how hundreds of people have died just days after complaining of a headache. The culprit?
Your
a creature
DNA
now living in our
can
ponds,
fuck
lakes,
you
and
over
even drinking
sometimes.
water that is wriggling its way into
life.
people's heads and eating their brains. Click the video on screen to learn more.
Yeah. So yeah. That big flash, it was the Trinity testing. Nuclear testing for the Manhattan projects. I mean, as soon as I heard, like, the bright light, I'm like, oh, man. and then it was, like, flashing from 3 states. It's like, oh, shit. That doesn't sound good. That sounds like a fucking nuke. But, yeah. It was the Trinity testing that fucking, right? They were 50 miles away from when it happened. Right, the snowfall and everything. Yeah, that was radiated fucking ash and disgustingness, basically. It was toxic rain, essentially. Toxic snow rain stuff. All right. I don't know if, what was this? Oh, this was January. Did I watch this? This one. It's familiar. Oh. I usually watch this guy from time to time. He has basically talks a lot about fucking historical stuff. Right, and talking about the killing of the North Korean brother, right? North Korean president's brother. It just talks about a lot of fucked up things and a lot of crazy shit that humans get into. Anyways, Brew. There you go. You want to check him out.